My name is Jeff Bagg. I'm the city planner here in Easthampton, and I'll say it just one more time, but this is an amazing turnout. So we continually get a large number of people at our planning sessions, and that's so important. So it's a little hectic. We're pulling out chairs from the closet, but this is really meaningful, so this is a great opportunity. We may sort of massage the format a little bit as we go, just to make sure that we can get through all the information tonight. If it becomes totally apparent that we're not done or can't get through everything, we'll figure something out to have potentially another session. But I think it is reasonable to sort of get the overview, get some input, and then we'll have some exercises here. You'll get a full overview of each of the properties that we're looking at and an overview of what we're going to do. But I thought it was important to just start with the fact that we are in a pre-planning stage. What is happening across Massachusetts is that there's a group called the Stanton Foundation, and the Stanton Foundation is offering two types of grants for municipalities. One is for construction, and it's around $200,000 that can be put towards the construction of a dog park. And the Stanton Foundation also funds design, and that's a $25,000 grant that allows a town to go through a design process for a site. And what we found in starting the discussion was that there was no clear one spot where Easthampton would put a dog park. So the planning department went to the Community Preservation Act committee and asked for a relatively small amount of funding to have this pre-planning exercise happen. So we're working with Berkshire Design Group, and Jeff can tell you a little bit about their work doing dog parks in Massachusetts. So the idea is that we, with the property subcommittee, so that's a subcommittee of the city council, and I actually will probably turn it over to Owen and JP to give this overview, but what we're trying to do tonight is take 7 sites that are currently city-owned properties and do some basic evaluation to see if we can get it down to 1 or 2 that would be preferred. So what I'm hoping that people can do is just be, when we have the opportunity to talk through this, just be respectful, be polite, because this is the process that we want to go from 7 down to 1 or 2. So we're all here for some reason, and this will be some kind of process of elimination. So if you have questions or concerns about a site, we just want it to be respectful and a good dialogue, but that is actually the goal, is to take several of these properties off the list. Is this like a clarification question?
Just about the money. Where the funds for maintenance?
Right, and so I think we'll cover that. I think one of the two, we'll cover that for sure by the end, but I think one of the two counselors can probably touch on that. And I think my observation is that we're at the beginning. Fundraising or coming up with an endowment or a Friends of group will be part of this, but it's so early that we don't even have a site yet. So I think we can talk about that a little bit as in part of the intros. So I'm really happy that everyone's here. We did have a sign-in sheet somewhere, so I'm going to find that and keep passing that around. It's my daughter's notebook, but we'll make do with that. And then we're going to have this video online, and the last thing I'll say, and I'll hand it over, is that we tried pretty hard to get some word out, and this is great. So obviously people heard about it. We're using Facebook as a tool to help get information out. So as part of this process, if you ever go on Facebook, try to like or follow the Easthampton Planning Department, because it's one of our ways that we can get information kind of more direct to people. But we have information on the website, and we continue to try to get articles in the newspaper. But the emails that you put down, we can gather and have a list for follow-up information. So I think with that, I'm going to pass it over to Councilor Kwasinski. And just remember that this microphone is for the people at home, so you do have to speak kind of loud.
Hi, I'm JP Kwasinski. I'm the chair of the Property Committee. I'd like to introduce the Property Committee members. Owen Zarrett, Tom Peak, would you please stand up? The other counselors we have here, if you'd all stand for a moment. I've invited, stand up, please. Omar. We have Salem Derby, Peg Conniff, Billy Lynch, Dan Rist, and Omar Gomez. We have had we've had a good turnout to be able to listen to what you have to say about the various sites and the entire process. We want this to be as open and public as possible. We're looking forward to your input. In terms of where we go from here, what will happen is hopefully we'll be able to identify objectively the issues that are in hand and all the other issues. From there, we expect that we'll have many more meetings to be able to identify and hone down many more. There will at least be one or two more. There will be additional public input. So with that, I'll turn it over to Councilor Zaret, who had brought this to the table here in Easthampton. We're excited about the possibility and seeing if there's a good fit. Councilor Zaret?
Thank you, Councilor Kwasinski. And thank you, everyone, for turning out tonight. This has certainly been a passion project of mine, and it's really great to see so many people here from the community. I think that with projects like this, we can only be as successful as the number of people who are engaged. So seeing this many people in the room tonight makes me feel that this is going to be a successful project. As Jeff has mentioned and Councilor Kwasinski has mentioned, we're in the really early stage of this project here. This was something that is already now almost a year in the making, believe it or not, which started with some conversations with members of our police department who shared with me the existence of these Stanton grants. That's how we got our great police dog Gino and some of his training. You know, I know that Easthampton is a very dog-friendly city. One of the things that attracted me to the Pioneer Valley was the dog park in Northampton. I know our neighbor to the north there. And when I used to live in the Plains, I used to walk my dog over in an area in Southampton bordered by Pomeroy and Cook Road. But we don't really have a dedicated space in the city that's dog friendly and a great place to bring your dog off leash, legally off leash, and safe also. I know a lot of people have made Nonotuck Park the dog park of the city, and it's a great place to walk your dog, but technically they're not supposed to be off leash. It's seasonal. There could be potential interference with other activities going on there. So, you know, we want to make sure that the dogs of Easthampton have their place too, right? And that the people who love their dogs have a nice place to congregate as well. As mentioned, there's no shovel in the ground here. This is a really early stage. So while it is important to talk about funding for maintenance, et cetera, I think the first thing we have to do is figure out the where. And that's where all these drawings here are outlined for you from our consultant, who I'm going to turn this over to in a little while. This was a really great, thoughtful process, and again, one of the things I love about doing the job I do is that I get to work with a great planning department, the people of Easthampton, the City Council, the Property Subcommittee, and consultants who come in and help us with work like this. So those are a few thank yous, and I also want to give a particular thank you to the CPA committee, who was kind enough to grant us was it $9,000? $9,000 to be able to pay the consultant to come up with these initial drawings here. It's through projects like this that are the exact point of CPA funding, and something that we should all think about. A couple other things I'll say is that I think, what was the term you used? Massage. We'll have to massage the process as we go along. Kind of pull back on the leash maybe might be a little bit more appropriate. Obviously, people should feel that they have an opportunity to speak tonight. We'll have to see what that format will look like. I would encourage people that, while I've gotten a lot of feedback about which locations people feel might not be the best place or the ones that they prefer, it really also is important to focus on, well, what areas should we try to put this park in? And what else? That's pretty much it. But I really want to thank everyone for coming out. Again, this is our community is only as successful as the participation we have from our residents. So thank you, everybody, for coming. And I'm going to turn it over to our consultant.
Beautiful. Thank you, Counselor. Actually, I've got one of these, so you can hold on to that, I guess. Yeah, this is a fantastic turnout. This is great. I'm Jeff Squire from the Berkshire Design Group, and I guess what I'll do is just explain a little bit our firm, our involvement with the Stanton Foundation, and then sort of walk you through the parade of pictures up here. But we're a landscape architectural, civil engineering, and survey firm in Northampton. We've been in the area for 34 years now. We love projects like this that are, that engage the community and seek to produce places that people love and enjoy. So these dog parks and other parks like this are sort of near and dear to our heart as a company. We've done probably 13, 14 dog parks across the state now. We just finished one up in Nantucket. We've got a couple going on out in the eastern part of the state. There's a bunch locally. Most of these have been through the Stanton Foundation. There's a couple that have been privately funded. So we've become very educated on the Stanton process there, the way they run projects through them. And as Jeff said, they have two grant programs. They have one for design, which pays for 100% of the design for a dog park, and then they pay up to 80% of the construction costs of a park, up to $225,000, I think, is the current number, somewhere in there. And so we'll work with them to work with municipalities to obtain the design grant, which hopefully then gets funded to go on to construction. So the way it works with Stanton is you've got to submit a grant application to them with a design on a piece of property, and they've got several criteria that have got to be checked in terms of their grant process. One is that it's got to be they've only got to deal with a town. They will not deal with a friends of group. They will not deal with private or nonprofit entities. They will only deal with someone from the municipality and a single person. So it could be a town planner, it could be the administrator, but that's one thing, one of their requirements. They've got several park requirements. So this is for Stanton, this is specifically an off-leash park. So meaning it's going to be a fenced park. It's not going to be like Northampton at the village, at the state hospital grounds, because that is technically not an off-leash park. An off-leash park is surrounded by fencing, so dogs can be allowed to be off-leash in the park and not worry about them getting away. So that's one of the other goals. They require shade, they require water, specifically for the dogs. They like it to be potable for people as well, but they do require water to be there. And then it also has to be accessible, handicap accessible. So there's a number of things that Stanton requires just to even get in the door. And then the last thing is it's got to be on a piece of town property. It's got to be on a piece of property that the town owns. And so this is sort of where we're at now, is we're very early in the process trying to identify a property or a couple of properties that the town owns, that the city owns, that could potentially be a home for a dog park. And the next step would be to go through and see if a design actually works well on these sites. But before we can even apply for a design grant, we have to have a site and draw some concepts as to what a dog park would look like. And then so the criteria that these aren't all set in stone. These are ones that we've used as a firm to evaluate dog parks and some of the considerations that need to be put into play. I will say that as I go through these, I think there's a number of them that every park is going to satisfy regardless. They've all got to have a certain size to be a functional dog park. So there's going to be sites, if there's sites that don't have the adequate space, it really doesn't make the list to begin with. They're all going to seek to minimize environmental impact. They're not going to be placed in wetlands or adjacent to resource areas that would raise concern. Riverfront areas. We're not going to put a park in those locations. So. Stuff like infrastructure, we're going to need a road to get to, or an access way to get to the park. So there's a number of these criteria that are going to be provided regardless of its location. So I think some of these get a little bit more objective and are easier to qualify There's a few in here, especially the visibility, the visible location, and the compatibility are really the bigger issues that I think everybody is at the core of it is really interested in talking about. So. Just running through these real quickly. Dog park sizes, most of the parks that we've designed are somewhere between 1.5 and 2 acres. Generally, they're split up into a small dog area and a large dog area. Sometimes they're 3 areas. Again, that'll be a function of the sort of the design process as the process moves along. But 1.5 acres to 2 acres seems to be a pretty good size to accommodate parking, trails, gates, all of the things that a dog park needs to have. Noise is on here, which often comes up as a major concern. I will say that I don't think that it shouldn't be a concern, but I will say from our experience in the parks that we've done and the groups, all the various groups that we've worked with, that typically dog parks aren't the kennel that everybody expects them to be or thinks that they're going to be. Dogs generally in dog parks are running around playing, they're not barking. Noise from barking dogs isn't a major issue at the majority of dog parks. Again, it's not to say that it shouldn't be a concern, it's something to be considered, but in our experience with the ones that we've done, dog parks aren't typically a real loud, noisy environment. Environmental impact, obviously, we want to avoid streams and resource areas that might be close by. Generally, dog parks don't generate, much in the way of environmental impact or have much environmental impact. We'll deal with parking lot runoff and trail, potential erosion issues with those in and of itself, but the park itself is largely, natural materials. It's pea stone, it's lawn, it's some form of gravel or grass. So, it's a park environment. So typically, there aren't a lot of environmental impacts associated with dog parks. Waste is often picked up, by the owners on a daily basis. Our experience is, at least with dog parks, that people really take ownership of their parks. There's something about dog parks and that community that we don't want to turn these parks into places that people don't want to be. So picking up after your pet, making sure that people pick up after their own dogs is something that just seems to be instilled at these dog parks. So typically, dog waste isn't a huge issue, and part of the Stanton requirement is that their dog waste stations be provided. So that's, again, another checkbox that they require. Infrastructure, again, the major concerns here, or the considerations here, are road access, drive access, certainly getting farther into a site versus ones that are closer to a road cost a lot more. Roads and that sort of infrastructure is expensive. So one of the things that we have seen in several parks that we've done is the prices do jump up dramatically if that road cost, the construction of that parking lot needs to all be rolled into the construction of the dog park. So the longer that access drive gets, the more challenging it gets with the construction budget. Water needs to be available. Ideally, there is town water available. We have done parks where they've drilled a well. They'll use a private well for irrigation, for dog fountains. But most of them rely on municipal water nearby. So again, the longer that line needs to be to get from point A to point B, the more expensive it gets. So all of those considerations should be part of the process. Safe, visible location. Again, we don't want to tuck, a park. Typically, especially of these sizes, 1.5 acres, 2 acres is real easy to get lost way back in the woods somewhere. So we want to make sure that it's a safe environment, that it's not somewhere where people are going to be afraid to be out in the woods and be accessible if something should happen. So we just want to make sure that they're in safe locations. Accessible, again, the accessibility piece, all of these parks will be accessible in any location. We've got to provide handicap parking spaces, curb ramps, the entry plaza, all of that has to be accessible by ADA standards. So regardless of which site, there will be an accessible path and route at each park. And then lastly, and I think this is the bulk of the discussion, is just compatibility with the adjacent land uses. So really it's about putting the park in the best place. Ideally it's in a place that's easy to get to for a lot of people in town, doesn't create a lot of traffic concerns, doesn't infringe on people's private property if it's close by, and generally has some space to do what we want to do, which is build a dog park. We want space for dogs and folks to wander and run around. So that's the overall objective. So I think at the end of the day, making sure that it's in a place where people will want to be and that's easy to get to is a primary consideration. So what I'll do is I'll sort of run through these the 7 sites that we've got. I don't want to sway anybody's opinion. I'll give you some of my initial reactions or thoughts with each of these sites. And then at the end, and maybe best to take questions or talk about each site or wait till the end. Maybe that's a...
This is the massaging.
Right.
I think, Jeff, I think if you go through each one and perhaps just go over the baseline criteria, which is on the next sheet.
Yep.
Then maybe we go back through once and go through each site and get some comments on each site. Try to kind of go through each one. There's a lot of people here, so the idea would be for Mr. Squire to run through so you understand what we're looking at. And then go back and just take comments on each site and try to kind of get through them all based on the criteria that Jeff will introduce. And then at the end, so there's a lot of time here,
Yep.
but at the end, the goal that we had was we have some dots, so it's
Yep.
planning dots. After you've learned about each site and we've talked through the questions and issues that you see, then you can get some dots and then you can kind of mark the site that you think actually might be the best one if there is one. So
Yeah.
do you think that that's manageable?
Yes.
I can try.
Yep.
Question clarity?
Yeah.
Sure.
Before we start, is there an opportunity to discuss the criteria?
Sure.
Is that open for discussion or is that final?
Well, I think if you keep these in mind, so Jeff gave
Right.
an overview, and do you mind maybe as you go through each one, this is where there's so if you go through the ranking score here, the idea, maybe go through each site. Sorry,
I understand that. I'm
Okay.
just curious about how that criteria was developed. I'm wondering why we cannot include a site that includes water for the dogs to swim?
We can. It becomes an environmental issue.
Okay.
We've done parks with pools in them. If conservation commissions are okay, that's generally the issue.
Okay.
Is that we've tried it in 2 municipalities, and the conservation commission, because it's either within a riverfront area or it's a regulated wetland, that getting a fence across that stream or somehow incorporating that into the park becomes a big environmental challenge from a permitting perspective. It's not to say we haven't built water features in parks. Yes.
Could you talk about each site? Could you point out on the map which one you're talking about?
Yes. Yep. All right. So any more questions about the step? So yeah, at the end, we've got 3 colored dots, and the hope is that we can give everybody an opportunity to vote for the first, second, and third choice, and hopefully come out of this with a couple of favorites. So.
I'm not sure, just one question about this. I'm not sure if it would fall under environmental impact or where it would fall, but just the number of cars versus walkability to the park.
So this is a question about cars, access, and walkability. So I think it will come up in a couple of these. I think as Mr. Squire goes through, I think we'll touch on that.
So, so the first 2 sites are up at the end of Oliver Street, 155 Oliver, up in the vicinity of the solar field, the solar array. And so there's 2 sites that we looked at. One is further back in the site. This is the largest solar array, Oliver Street's on the left here. So the first site is tucked back in the corner of the solar field. There's an area there that's big enough to hold a dog park. And so what we did is, in all of these drawings, you'll see an area, an oval that's roughly 2 acres in size. There's a smaller oval that holds, that indicates space for roughly 20 cars. And so what we did in each of these is take each of these areas and try to apply them on each site to see how they fit. And as constraints, what you'll see in green are any wetlands, other resource areas, streams, any of those types of environmental concerns. And in pink is what we've called a noise buffer. Really, it's more to provide a buffer around residential properties of 150 feet or more. So what we've done is we've just drawn some some outlines of what a preferable buffer would be around those homes. Question about that?
Is that 150 feet from a house or from the edge of the property?
I'm gonna say, looking at these, that these are from the houses or from the structures themselves. Yeah. And again, it's somewhat of an arbitrary number. Its intent is really to provide some buffer, some measurable buffer from homes. It could be 200 feet, it could be 100 feet, but it at least establishes some baseline as to where would be areas that would be concerning. So Oliver Street. So this site, actually this is site number 2. Yeah, this is okay. So this sits back in the back of the site. There is an access way along the edge of the solar array, outside the fence, to what could be a parking area. We'd have to get water back there, and an access drive obviously would be a little bit longer than in some of these other schemes. The other site at the end of Oliver, adjacent to the solar field, is on the other side of Oliver Street. At the end, this parcel sits at the top of the hill. There's roughly 8 acres in all, so we're really looking at 2.5 acres of that to satisfy the space needs for a dog park. I think there's town water. There's certainly access along Oliver Street, and with this site, it's tucked a little bit further away. It is at the edge of town, which I think is one consideration. Both these sites sit up here. I think the question about walkability versus drivability is certainly something to consider. What I will say is, we've found, it's not like bike riders where people will travel a couple of miles or something to get to a dog park. Typically, if they're walking a dog, it has to be pretty close. So if they're going to walk a dog to a dog park, it should be closer to, the higher population densities, at least from, what we've seen. So both these sites are at the end of Oliver Street, again, at the north end of town. Site number 3 is on Holyoke Street. So this is at the base of Mountain Road. So Mountain Road, Holyoke Street comes down. Hendrick Street is this road here that goes off diagonally to the left. So this parcel sits behind the homes, and it includes that large field and part of the stream in the back. It's a large open area. There's well over 2 acres.
Sir,
Yes.
I'm Wanda Polakowski. I'm an abutter of that property. I lease that property.
Okay.
And it's a large field, right in the middle, where it shows you wetlands. It's bigger than that.
Okay.
It's much bigger than that. And when it's a rainy season, everything is literally stuck there. You have deer, you have bear, you have everything coming in there.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And we have it for agriculture. It's a hayfield. And we use it for hayfield, and we lease the property.
Okay.
So the community is getting something for it. The other person that's a butter is David Boyd. soil. He has the other half,
Okay.
and he does the same thing.
Okay. And again, I'm here as a third-party consultant looking at some sites that were presented by the city to us and how they're being used, what they're being used for. The delineation of these wetlands aren't things that, we've gone out and done with a science.
Excuse me, who did make those delineations for the wetlands?
These are Mass GIS based. Yeah.
The city has it, this is what the city.
We haven't hired a wetland scientist to go out and map all the wetlands on each and every one of these 7 sites because it's not feasible to do with that amount. So this is generally understanding what resource areas are there, what the major concerns are, and again, going through a number of sites, and a number will hopefully drop off tonight for any number of reasons.
So I think,
I have a question.
yep, so we'll get to your question. I think for the next, if we can get through the next couple sites, and then,
This pertains to all the sites.
okay, and then but I do want to just remind everyone that the idea would be that we want to come back and then facilitate a quick discussion of each one, so it's.
But this is pertaining to all these sites, okay? Are these sites gonna be lit after dusk?
We don't know yet.
And they're gonna have to have some sort of water supply, correct, for the dogs? Yeah.
Right.
I think most of these parks are dawn to dusk, just so that most people know.
Yeah.
Typically.
Yeah. Most of them are not lit at night in our experience. Yeah. Okay, I would just finish presenting the plan, and again, Jeff said we can go back and we can talk about some of the other issues. What we did look at here is that there is potential access off of Hendrick Street that is some distance from the intersection, is still is a concern, from a public access point. There are some resource area issues and concerns, and there is some topography here that that you need to be cognizant of, but. It's a large property. There is a fair amount of open space there, and so in terms of having the ability to, find 2 acres that may be usable on there seemed feasible on this one. Site 4 and 5 are. So these are off of what's known as Treehouse Circle. The Park Street is over here on the left side of the road, left side of the page. This is Treehouse Circle. There's a large parcel here that has some frontage on Park Street, and then gets much larger further back in the property. There is a major wetland system that splits it in half. There's another one in the rear of the property. So it isolates a little bit what you're able to gain access to. The first site that we looked at is the location of all the dredged material from Nonotuck Pond, and it's a large open area. Again, from the pure standpoint of constructability and environmental issues or concerns, this site lends itself very well. There's no trees to remove. There's, there isn't much work to be done there to prepare itself for a park. And there is sufficient space. It's about it's a little over a 9-acre parcel, at least what's outlined here in red. That said, I think that its proximity to residential homes and a dense neighborhood, and its sort of isolated location through that neighborhood to provide access is a little bit of a challenge. Similarly, with this site, there's a site in back of the homes along Park Street, roughly about 7 acres is this area here. There's certainly home for a 2-acre dog park and parking with access off of Park Street through the right-of-way there. Again, a major park access road between residential homes on a relatively steep grade is a little bit of a concern. So, but there is room for a park of the size that we're looking for on those 2 properties.
Quickly, the rear site has access from the park. There is a road that stops. No. soccer fields, at the end of the far soccer fields, if you keep on going, there's a water station. If you follow that road, it turns into a logging road into a path, but you can access that site right now by walking from the park. That's all I want to point out.
Okay. Great, thank you. The sixth site that we looked at was at the end of Highland Ave. There's a large 10-acre parcel. I guess it used to be the former Boy Scout camp. But there's a beautiful wooded site back there that, again, has certainly enough space for a 2-acre dog park and some parking. There is town water. There is a resource area, riverfront to be concerned with on the northwest. But again, the grades and topography along that edge really prevent you from doing much along there anyway. I think the biggest challenge with this site is access. Most of any of the frontage points along Highland Ave are particularly challenging. They're steep. It's a challenge to get into this site. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity there. We did look at trying to get access from the back, but again, there's a major wetland system in the back that prevent connecting it with Industrial Drive, which was another consideration to try and utilize this property for something. So again, at the end of Highland Ave, it's a beautiful 10-acre wooded site that could potentially be home to a dog park. And then lastly, the seventh site is in Nonotuck Park. So the entrance, let's see, where I gotta get my bearings here. The two ball fields are here. The entrance road is up here. You come in, take a left, and it's down that access way there. There's a fair amount of wooded area that's generally pretty flat. Off the back of the access road that, again, to find a 2-acre space for a dog park with parking off of that main road is certainly a potential there. The high school track you can see in the lower left corner. Or middle school, I'm sorry, middle school, yes, it does say high school.
But it's not a high school.
Right, it's a middle school, right, sorry.
So the track is where part of the new school will be.
Right.
I mean, the building itself.
Yep.
How do you access that?
This would be through Nonotuck Park.
In the wintertime, that would be an issue.
Well, I think that's part of the discussion. These are all, from our standpoint in terms of providing, sufficient space, a lot of the infrastructure, shade, a lot of that type of stuff. All of these sites could potentially work. I think, again, going back to the beginning, I think there's some discussion about how each of these criteria, and again, what we tried to do is, apply each of those criteria that I was discussing before to each of these sites. So, for example, site number 1, is it, does it have sufficient size? And again, as a lot of these I think are objective in that, these have all got enough size, or the size sufficient for a dog park, as I've demonstrated. They've all got 2 acres. So there are some of these that I think are less of a discussion point than others. And so, your question?
On the website, all these pictures are listed, and you have 2 that aren't included up here. There's a second one on the Easthampton webpage in Nonotuck with the ball fields. Has that been removed from the potential site?
That was an earlier iteration, I think, that eliminated some of the sites right from the get-go because they didn't satisfy some of these criteria. Again, they either weren't large enough, they were too close to homes, access was challenging. So there were a number of other sites that we did consider that got eliminated earlier on.
And just on that same note, so there are some plans posted on websites. I appreciate the plug for looking online. There was a site right at the very entrance to Nonotuck, which is the older playground. It's very small, and so at the last property subcommittee meeting, it was just chosen to remove it. It wouldn't even achieve viable size. And then similarly, there was one other property that had been on the list early on, which was Lincoln Street. So, you know, it's off of Parson Street. So the city had Parson School, which has been converted to housing units, and then there's a 1 acre parcel behind it. And so that was on the list for a little while to, I think, to give a nod to the idea of being able to walk through the site. But I think we do have this inherent conflict with the ability to walk to a site. In most cases, is going to lead to having issues with being too close to home. So the site on Parson Street or Lincoln Ave was also removed by the property subcommittee, just because it just was surrounded by homes and couldn't pass the size test or some of the noise. Those are the basic tests. So I've seen lots of hands. So what I wonder if we can do, I'm hoping, is maybe go back through the sites, and if we can, and my job, I guess, would be to politely kind of facilitate us through. But I see hands, and there might be general clarification questions. Is that not on? Thank you.
Something you just said.
Sure.
So what I think I heard you say was at the last meeting, there was an idea of having the dog park near the playground. And then that suggestion is now been made.
Correct. So the one I mentioned that at Nonotuck site, right as you enter like before you actually enter Nonotuck at the booth, there's the playground area, and that was the site sort of to be evaluated, and it was chosen to be removed before it even made it to this public forum. So I think what I'll do is I'll take some questions of clarification, and then we would like to go kind of through each site and gather some input. So
The clarity I need, or maybe you or Owen, is that the Stanton Foundation, Jeff, is paying, is the grant we're going after, and these criteria are based on their criteria for a park? No?
No.
There's something you've developed?
It was Berkshire Design's selection of criteria based on our experience from other parks, that these are the major considerations that usually come up for each park.
So the grant people?
Right.
Are some of their requirements also considered in here?
Yes.
So if we don't hit one of the criteria that the Stanton Foundation has, then that park should be eliminated, only because we need the grant money. That's what I'm getting at.
Correct. So as I was saying, there's a number of things that, most of the items required by the Stanton Foundation are relative to the elements within the park. So they've got to be, it's got to be fenced, it's got to have water, it's got to have accessible entrances. The requirement from the town, the deal with the town is it's got to be on a piece of town property that can accommodate all of that.
Another point of order too, and I just want to clarify again for the group, is that this process is really just to identify a site for a potential park and to be able to get the design grant. And that grant is 100% funded, up to $25,000. No money from the city, correct? And, you know, fortunately or unfortunately, that will provide us with designs for a potential park to build, but that doesn't mean that that park's going to be built. Now, I hope it will, and I think other people in this room hope it will, but that's kind of where we are in this process right now. And some of these other questions, they're very prudent and they're very applicable to the process, but right now we're just trying to figure out how we can even start designing this. Doesn't mean anything will ever get built. So keep that in mind.
So another question of clarification?
Yeah, just one question. Have you gone to all of these sites? You actually physically
Yes.
gone? So you have?
Yes. I may not have walked around them extensively, but I visited each site.
You visited each site?
Yeah.
Great. So
you didn't just drove by and thought? You did?
No, I got out and looked at the site to look at, you know, where homes were and roads and all of the considerations, and tried to envision a dog park being there.
great. So this is where it's going to get fun. But I want to encourage people to remember that if we can get through each of these and get input, so each of, I imagine that some of you are very familiar with some of the sites. So this is the kind of input that we want to have for each site. And then remember, what we hope to do is maybe we'll spread these out a little bit and have everyone come up and try to help us then rank them once you've learned and we've all heard kind of what the questions and issues are. So with that, again, I'm going to try to be the polite facilitator. So just to try to keep us on track, I think if you can articulate your question or concern, if other people, I don't think we need to repeat every question or issue, and I'll try to kind of facilitate that process so we can get through some of these. Again, should I do this? Size, noise, environmental impact, site infrastructure, safe visible location, accessible location, compatible with adjacent land uses, and overall score. And the way this works in theory, when we're done, is a 1 ranking is least favorable, and 2, 3, and then 4 is most favorable. So we may not actually articulate all these here. Actually, we may try with the input. So this is the massaging part as we take this as we go. So.
Will you please repeat the number 1 to the number 5?
Sure, sorry, yes. 1 is low. 4 is going to be high and favorable. So 1 is bad, 4 is good.
It's bad.
Right. So Jeff, do you want to help me? So we're looking at, you want to start with Oliver Street? Or do you have?
Sure. Yeah, no, and I'm trying to.
Yes, question, sorry.
I was just going to ask if we could actually start with the non-touch site first and go backwards, because I really love to speak in favor of the non-touch site, and before all the negativity happens, to say I don't think that's a really ideal place. I think it's always
Let's go one left to right. Because I think that's where most people want.
Well, I don't think it's fair to just cast a vote yet. I think we need to talk through as a group and go through each site. I would like to try to start with number 1, just because I think otherwise it's going to be a little bit disjointed as we jumped.
Knock out the first 5, let's go to number 4.
So let's try this. So the first 2 sites are the solar property, and I wanted to put a special plug in for my favorite place in Easthampton, which is the brush dump. So if you are familiar, the brush dump is this small narrow piece up here. So the solar array, again, all these properties are city-owned. So site number, so site number 1. Okay, so site number 1 on the left side of Oliver Street at the end. Questions or concerns?
I'm concerned with both of the Oliver site, and because we have some others as well, is they're on the edge of town. They feel more like in a different community, and I think if the city of Easthampton puts the money and the thought and everything behind this, not to say that people can't come from other towns to come there, but I think it should be more central to the city of Easthampton versus on the edge of, and it's very close to the private one that's being built in Northampton. So those folks will just come, I just think it's on the edge.
Yeah. Sure. So if you heard that that's the location far from the center of town, and I think that's important, but I think as we go through, we're going to have to kind of balance all of these together. So just to be clear and fair, the site number 1 would require tree removal. And part of this process would be further evaluation of that site to make sure that there's not any significant trees or, a rare tree or large historic tree or something like that. So anyone else with, and I guess if Jeff didn't say this, the idea would be that parking would be pretty accessible right off of Oliver Street. So the value added might be that infrastructure costs to create parking would be relatively low. So going once, Oliver Street.
Yes. With regards to Oliver Street, from here it looks like there are no residential homes in that vicinity. Is that inaccurate?
There is one.
There's like
So this is Park Hill Road, if I'm not mistaken. Clark Lane turns into. Clark. Okay, thank you. So Clark Lane, there's a house on the corner of Clark Lane, but that would be pretty far from the actual property, whereas this last house here.
There's another one on Oliver.
Right. So.
There's 2 or 3 houses that would be.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Is there a bus service to the public gardens?
community gardens? Because that's kind of right around the corner from both of these.
So the question was whether there's bus service onto Park Hill Road where the community gardens are.
Yeah.
I see heads nodding no, and so I don't think so. Right, right. Okay, so transportation. Okay. And then site number 2, the idea would be to combine, so in terms of compatible uses, we have solar panels, so, little disruption with the compatible use. But to get into the rear of this property would be presumably road access to a parking area. So the infrastructure costs to do that are pretty high. And you have wetlands in the vicinity, so there's always a question of whether building a road next to wetlands would require additional permitting. Solar, okay, that's great.
Number 2, though, I don't, that's a capped landfill, and in that area, even though looks dry, is, heavy soil anyway. So, I mean, I think you'd have higher infrastructure costs than you might realize. I used to live out there, and that area, with the capped landfill and the water leaching, I don't know if you want to mess with that.
Okay, that's a good point. Good, so if we move to, okay, great, yep.
Just one quick question. Does it have to be tied into water, or can it be well? Because that would kind of nix that if we put a well.
It can be a well, but ideally.
I know the one the dog parks I investigated around the state, they use a well. They're not tied into the water.
Right.
So it made it easier when there was long roads to get into it. So.
Yeah.
Jeff?
That's why I said that would kind of nix that.
That would, so, yeah, so that's a complication.
Are there not methane vents all over the place there? I'm wondering, because it is a capped landfill, they usually vent them.
Yeah.
And I didn't know if you saw that. I forget his name from Berkshire.
Jeff, yeah.
It's pretty easy.
2 Jeffs.
Pretty easy.
Okay, that makes it easy.
I didn't walk on the backside of the array.
I thought if that's part of the capped landfill, as Dave said, that there's probably methane vents, and I don't think that would be compatible with the dog park.
But the left side's okay.
I'm not sure.
Left side is not part of the landfill.
No, but the one in the corner right there, yeah, that's what I'm talking
I do wonder, and there are other investigations that would have to happen even if we get to one site, but this is wooded. And the best guess is that this is aged trees out here. So I would hazard the guess that this was not part of the capped landfill.
Yeah, but the ground is orange.
Right.
It's a lower elevation.
And it's a lower elevation. Okay.
Yeah.
So those are very, very good points for that. Yes. So we'll move over to Holyoke Street, and I know that people have questions and interests of this parcel. So, ma'am.
Can I come up?
Sure. Sure. I'm going to hand this to you.
That's fine. I'm used to talking a little bit.
So I will say, so this is where the meetings, evolve a little bit.
So my name's Joy Whitney.
Okay. Hi, Joy.
I live at 157 Holyoke Street. Parcel here was my grandfather's. My grandfather bought it 85 years ago. All the way to the back of this property, this little piece of 2.8 acres is mine. It was deeded to me.
This parcel here.
This parcel here. I have a right-of-way, a legal right-of-way, that starts here in the corner of the Kaznert's property, follows the tree line all the way down, all the way to the brook, to my property.
Could you stand to the side?
My right-of-way goes right through the middle of your park. That's a legal right-of-way. You can't block it. You can't put a fence up. That's mine.
I appreciate that. So that's very helpful information. Just to recap, though, we were just wondering if this is our park location. So I saw other people who, I seem to have interest in this parcel. So, ma'am, yes.
So if I live on 150 Holyoke Street, and it's Indianapolis Raceway, and has anybody ever taken stock of how many car accidents are on that road, what the traffic congestion is like at any time of day, and people coming, trying to get in and out of there, trying to zoom in front of cars, accident waiting to happen. A dog gets out, some kid opens the gate, dog gets out, dog is dead.
Absolutely.
I can tell you that.
Where is 150? If we
Right next to my house.
Okay. This is my house, this is my garage. I
Well, that's very helpful, and I think the concerns, and this one here, this large parcel in the middle. So just to recap, the concern was speed of travel on Holyoke Street and the intersection. So there are two.
And Hendrick Street.
Right, as I was going to say, there's
Don't discount Hendrick Street.
Right. So we just want to remember, we're talking through this. I think the intersection of Hendrick Street is an identified potential problem area, and then I think the other area is the intersection of East Street, right? So
It's not a potential, it's a definite. It's a definite. You can't go up the mountain, and you can't go into town from 6 in the morning till about 9. And then at night, at 3 till about 6:37.
I think we get the idea.
right, that's fair. Okay.
You can't get into the dog park.
I'm going to take ma'am and then the gentleman in the back.
On what Debbie said, she is my neighbor, I can attest to this. My house personally was hit twice
Yes.
by cars coming down 141. My bushes that sit diagonally on the driveway were taken out 4 times in 1 year.
And we spoke really
I live
quickly.
at 158 Holyoke, right on the corner of Holyoke and Hendrick Street.
Correct.
I have sat on numerous occasions to get up streets for over 10 minutes in my driveway trying to pull out on the main thoroughfare there.
Right, so traffic in general is obviously.
And it's not just the 4-wheelers, we're talking the 18-wheelers that are utilizing 141 a lot more, utilizing Hendrick Street. And they are actually, when they're coming out of Hendrick Street, they're utilizing the down lane of 141 to make it up the mountain.
Right, and we were presumably talking about access off of Hendrick Street, so.
Well, good
this-
luck to you, because the people that are gonna be there, they're gonna be sitting there for 20 minutes trying to get out.
Right, okay, it's definitely heard. Sir, you had your hand up for this.
My opinion here doesn't really matter because I'm not a resident of Easthampton, but I am the guy that cuts that field. So for what it's worth, if you figure your prime time for people to take their dogs to these are going to be late afternoon, early evening, and yes, I would say your traffic alone would take this right out of contention immediately. I myself, when we get out of that field, I only have to do it a couple times a year.
That I will attest.
I have an appreciation for people sign language, how's that?
Sure, sir, for Holyoke Street property?
Well, actually, for the overall evaluation thing, one of the things I noticed in your series of evaluation points is you don't have anything for prior use or current land use, and whether it's, it's the, what are we losing to gain something else? And that could, I think that's a very important aspect of determining the place.
Right, and I think that there's a way to consider that within compatible with adjacent land uses and or current.
Well, because you use adjacent, I guess maybe if you're saying the current use of the land, okay. But
I think that's fair, and I pose a question back just because it's for clarity purposes, but so the lease agreement to pay the field, it's something that I don't have knowledge of in terms of the city-owned parcel and the lease that.
It's
two
leased
leases, yep.
from the city
Okay, from the city, thank you. So that's
Many
informative.
years.
Appreciate
for many,
that.
many years.
Many
It's
years.
5 years blocks.
Okay, that's fair. So we would call this then currently under
Yes.
agriculture
Right.
use, but not necessarily
Wait a
under
minute.
protected chapter land or anything like that.
But those leases are applicable to the city.
Yes, I would have assumed that, but I think the idea of disturbing an existing land use as part of this evaluation makes some sense.
Also, I'm just gonna interject this, that David takes the back half, the Boyle property in the back, he uses the back half for his horses and for his livestock, and he lets Riverside Industries use the upper half behind the Tryon house for their garden. So that's where Riverside plants all their vegetables that they sell Saturday market. Downtown is behind the Tryon's house, right on Holyoke Street, part of that property. So we want to talk value,
Yeah.
That's helpful. Yes, no, that's helpful information. You had your hand up?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, and I believe this is true, that it's over an aquifer.
Yes.
Yes, it is.
Oh, yes, it
I
has
didn't know if anybody knew that.
it has the aquifer signs right up there.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
So I think,
It's the recharge area.
right. So that's noted. I think yeah, so the Aquifer Protection Overlay District is important. I would guess that this doesn't rise to the level of being a problem. I mean, the things that are regulated are chemical use and large areas of impervious surfaces and how, so if you pave it with a parking lot, then they want to capture that water and make sure that it gets back into the ground. But it's a factor, so thank you for that. Way in the back for.
I was just wondering if we should just mix that area and move on. I'm just curious if there's actually anybody in here that just
That's fair. I think we're good. I think we're almost done. So this is the exercise that we're all in this together to keep doing. So I think with that, I'll take the cue to move on to the two properties on Park Street.
Yep.
Jeff, can you give another overview of so this is Button Road.
Button Road,
that goes
yes.
in, and then this is Park Street. So there are actually two sites to at least quickly explore.
Right. So the first one is right up closer to Park Street, behind behind the homes along that front Park Street. Between those homes and the wetlands in the back, there's roughly 7 acres of wooded property back there that the city owns that could potentially house a dog park. It's relatively flat back here. We'd obviously have to be cognizant of the riverfront area and the wetlands, but there is space back there. And the second one, do you want to stick on that? Yep. The second one is through Buttonwood, again, in the large cleared portion of that land where the dredged material from the pond have been deposited. But it's an open site. There's no trees there now. It's roughly 9 acres of open space ready to ready for something. So there isn't a lot of work to clear trees and whatnot back there. But it's so yeah, those are the two sites.
So I know people want to talk about this one. That's
Yeah.
fine. You got to kind of first, but do you want to?
Yeah, just because you had mentioned that part of the requirement is having a certain amount of shade. So for an open field like that, would you actually have to add structure
Yep.
for shade?
Typically, yes. Yeah. We can do it through trees, but they do acknowledge that they take a number of years to mature, and so you don't get immediate. So in sites that are generally wide open, they do prefer some sort of structure or shade element. So yes.
I think the gentleman who actually popped his hand up.
I'm Bob Salasco. I'm one of the abutters that my house is right in the triangle there.
Over here.
There are a number of issues about the property. One is access.
You're being difficult to hear.
There are a number of issues about that property. One is access along Button Road and River Valley Way. Button Road is a very narrow, very windy street. Sight lines are terrible. All of us who live in that area have had close calls, cars coming around, you can't see them. Often there are trucks and cars parked on Button Road, which gets it down to 1 lane. And it's the only access road to the Treehouse Circle, Treehouse community. There's no other road in there. If there's an accident there's no other way of getting in and out. There is a road connected to Whitebrook Middle School. Has a locked gate on it. It's there only for emergencies. So that's the only access.
Up here, yeah. That's good. Yep, that's very important.
So quick logistical question. Are we limiting ourselves to 2 acres? Like, is there a maximum that you're looking at because of like the fencing costs? 2 acres seems kind of small compared to like the Millwood Dog Park.
The Northampton Dog Park is particularly large, and it's not fenced. Yeah.
But are we limiting ourselves to 2 acres?
Depending on what you're willing to spend, no. Generally, we've been, in the last few parks that we've done, they've been fairly straightforward, not a lot of bells and whistles, and getting them to come in under that, that budget has been really close. And that's with 1.5 acres, 2 acres. So.
Go ahead.
Just to nix that in the bud, the NoHo Dog Park is not a NoHo Dog Park. It's owned by Smith Vocational, and they use it, but it's not a dog park. We can't afford a big swath of land like that. So, but I'm just pointing out, you can't compare it, because it's not the same thing that we're doing. We
The
don't
mayor
have
is
that.
very specifically named it Smith Farm Fields, not
Yeah.
the dog park.
I know.
Dogs and they're all,
Yeah, so
massive problem.
people are just under the assumption when they go there that it's not. It's actually Smith
It's
Vocational.
illegal.
Yeah, it's really not supposed to be there, but, you know.
You had your hand up.
I just have a comment. I know you said the dogs are not noisy. I won't argue that piece. But it will add more traffic to a very densely populated area. We have a lot of, the Treehouse community consists of a lot of elders. We have at least one elderly woman who walks her dog around the circle on her wheelchair, in her wheelchair. We have a number of other people, we have another woman who is intellectually challenged, who walks a dog. We have kids that, both on Button and on Treehouse, that are getting a little bit older and will be outside playing in the road, playing on the sidewalks and stuff. And just having the possibility of 20 cars, 150 feet from someone's house, not backyard, but house. I don't think anyone would want that in living that close to that much traffic and that much noise, be it dog or people coming and going, cars starting and stopping. But I think for all of these sites, except for Nunatak Park, you're impacting residents. And while the dog park is a wonderful thing and would be great to have, you have to be respectful of where you're putting it and how it's impacting neighbors. Yeah, that's right. And I just want to say that.
I think that's a fair point. I think you had your hand up, and then you.
Okay. I live on River Valley Way, which if you come down Button Road, and I want to reiterate how windy it is. I guess it doesn't show, but it's very, it wasn't designed to be windy. I
Right.
mean, it could be seen and all that. But the sight lines aren't always there because it's also hilly.
And River Valley Way is this
No, that's
slower?
Treehouse. That is Treehouse.
This is River Valley.
River Valley is right here, and this is the Treehouse.
Okay. Yep. So right where the entrance is. Yeah.
3 houses down. We bought that area because it was a circle and we wanted to be able to have our grandchild play and not be on a busy street. And I think a lot of people in that area bought for the fact that there wouldn't be a lot of traffic. So if the traffic is coming in that way, we've definitely got an issue. The other thing is, if I'm looking at this right, the pinkest map up there is this one.
The pink represents proximity to the houses. Yep.
It's much pinker than any of those, for both of those, and that's the noise buffer.
Right. Well, I think that's what I tried to allude to before, which is the balance between trying to get it somewhere where you could actually walk to from a residence. You know, that is the trade-off, is that it would be somewhere near residences. Right. Yep. Okay. I think you would.
Well, I just wondered, because I know there's several people here who live in the Treehouse community, what about like 6? Do you feel like that's going to impact traffic? I mean, that's right off the park.
Well,
It's a lot more accessible.
Yeah, I guess my other concern with off of Park in either one is we're putting the K through 8 at the middle school. And Park, if anybody drives down Park at either in the morning or after work, it is, there's a ton of traffic.
It's got that weird intersection.
And you're adding even more.
South Street on the
Yeah, and so you're adding even more, it's not quite as bad
It
as that kind
seems
of.
like a much more accessible
It is
spot, and it doesn't impact Treehouse, which is a pretty dense community, though it does impact the people on Park. I don't know if there's anyone here who lives along
park in that area.
I think what I heard is that it's more remote from a higher concentration of houses.
Yeah.
There is a couple questions about the access point, which is from Park Street, it goes down a hill. So, there is an infrastructure element to that, which is bringing a road down there. And then one of the basic evaluations that you would do is if you were a car coming up to leave, you would look at the line of sight in both directions. And so.
And the plowing problems?
The plowing problem, so I think I would ask Jeff about winter use. We've had some discussions about winter use of the parks in general. I know there's people who probably have actual experience with it, but in some cases, if the winter is not that bad, the parking area could be plowed and the park used. But my assumption is that at some point, the park may be snowed in. And I'm looking for dog park experts out there. Jeff, do you have any knowledge of that?
No, typically, you're right. Typically, anything more than an inch or two, most dog parks shut down. They don't, they don't have the funds or the wherewithal to plow them and maintain them. Generally, if there's that much snow in the park, the dogs aren't that interested in being out there anyway. So, generally, they don't get, most dog parks we've done don't get maintained in the winter.
Ma'am?
I was going to say that one in Holyoke is open in the winter because I'm taking my dog off, and it's a very small dog park.
The one right off 91 at the,
Yes, right off 91.
There.
Hi, I'm Mary Beth Garvey. I live on Button Road. I think it's important as we consider each of these that we think about not just the fact that this is my neighborhood and I don't want it in my neighborhood, but that we think about the greater purpose, and we also consider impact on roadways, construction that is currently planned, areas that might be slated for development. Certainly the impact on neighbors is huge, and I don't want to underestimate that. But I also don't want to underestimate the impact on habitat and environmental concerns. And when I look at all of the sites, that's what I'm thinking about. And when I look at the sites that are adjacent to my personal neighborhood, yes, I can say I like the one off of Park Street better because it's a little bit more remote, but honestly, I think it's still too densely populated. But my biggest concern for these particular lots is the fact that there are huge projects being slated in this general area, and that's going to be very disruptive to the land and to the ecosystems there. And I think that we may be better off considering things that are not as close to residential neighborhoods, and maybe in places that currently have parking and land available, such as the Nonotuck site. It seems to be preferable, in my opinion, to many of the other sites.
That's fair. That's good. So in the back, and then the gentleman there.
I'm Melissa Lake. I live at 15 River Valley, and so both of those sites are relatively close to our home. My concern, in addition to the proximity, were on the top site there, were the last house on the bottom left. My other concern is what this is going to do to the environment. When we purchased our home, we really were intentional and we wanted the conservation, and we met with Easthampton Conservation, and they described this wonderful wildlife corridor. I'm not sure if that's an official designation within the city or not, but I do wonder about the impact of fencing off that property. Right now, I can tell you, we have 4 deer out in that woods this morning. We have a lot of things out and about, and it's wonderful because I like to watch the birds. But I do really worry about if you're sticking fences in the middle of there, or if we've got 100 people over the course of the weekend or more, what that is going to do to a designated wildlife corridor, whether it's official conservation or not.
That's great. Thank you. Sir.
Question, isn't there a solar project approved for right in there somewhere that someone can point it out?
Yeah, so there is the projects I think that were alluded to is the development of the new school, the possibility of a roundabout on Park Street, and then there is a solar array that has been approved and is still, from my understanding, slated to be put in place, and that has a small access road in. It traverses this wetland and has solar arrays here and over here. And so that's been a process for the planning board and has already been approved, but those are expected to happen. I think I'll take one or two more and then maybe we'll shift down.
One quick question. With the new middle school going in, that road that's gated off now, is that going to still stay gated off? Do you know what the plans are for that, or is it going to change for that?
I do not know for sure. I think my understanding is that it's part of an emergency access only. So I don't think it's been incorporated into the school, but I'm not officially involved in that process. Certain, right.
A general question about the map. Are they all the same scale? I mean,
No, they are not.
so we're not getting a real sense of distance.
Well, I mean, this is all 150 feet. I mean, they're not relative, they're not comparable to each other because they are different scales. But
On that map is the same.
no, because this is a 1 in 80 scale. This is 1 in 80. This is 1 in 150, just because of the size of parcel.
So our visual understanding of what's going on there, it may look like something on one map and then on another map. It's a different scale, so distances are not the same.
I can understand what you're saying. So I think, but the areas that you have to focus on are the 2 acres are representative of 2 acres on each one. But so, for example, this one looks larger, but it's just because of the different scales.
Right.
On one, you might think, oh my goodness, look how close that is to a house. And on another one, you go, oh, that's much better. Whereas actually the scale is different and it's not necessarily any better or worse.
And I think in the final, if we get people to come up to the board, I think that's an important thing to look at. I think another example is the Holyoke Street property, which this is a very large parcel. So there's a lot of separation here, depending on the scale.
Could you please, just for the folks on TV, listening on TV, and for the folks in the room, just go quickly along each one and tell us the scale from 1 to 7?
Sure, I'll leave that.
Just so we can have that kind of general perception.
Sure. So this is a 1 in 100 scale. This overall parcel, let's see, this is 8 acres. This is 6 acres, but this is a 1 in 100 scale. This is 1 at 80. And yeah, I don't have an overall parcel size, but this is a 1 in 80 scale. This is 1 in 150. This is 7 acres here. This is 9 acres here. So just for comparison, this is what, 80 scale also. So this is 9 acres, but on this plan, this is a 10-acre parcel. And then this is a 1 in 80 scale also.
So I think we're going to move to, Mr. Ramsey?
Just a general statement.
Okay, general.
These dog parks are not Riverside Park, or I'm sorry, Six Flags. We're not bringing that kind of people. I mean, that amount of volume of cars, like a parade of cars. I've been to the Agawam Park, Holyoke Park. I've never seen this many people at a dog park. I'm just saying that the fear of a large amount of cars caravanning into your neighborhood, or a neighborhood, I have not seen that happen anywhere. I don't know if anybody in here has seen that happen. Because generally people are working, and
I've been to 6 dog parks in the state, and I've never seen more than 6 cars. And this is during the summer, this is always on a Sunday. Never seen more than 6 cars.
Yeah. Why don't you get it now, just during the unofficial dog park season, you may get 4 or 5 cars.
Yeah.
opening day at Little League.
I think that's useful. Thank you. That's helpful to kind of gauge. So we're doing good. We're going to go to Highland Ave and just talk through this one. Ma'am in the back.
You're doing all this study. Do you have any idea how many people will come in a day? Have you done that kind of research?
Jeff, have you?
No, I mean, but what we do base our experience on is just the other parks and the demands that those have seen. And again, a 20-car parking lot seems to be about as large as you would need to build for a park on, again, the busiest of busy days. That's a lot of cars. Yep.
What's the average stay
To be honestly, don't know. Yeah, it depends.
So when you drive in and see 6 cars, I would assume then the next hour is replaced with a new 6 cars, then replaced with another 6 cars. So, I mean, as far as...
Usually what we see is the dog parks get really busy in the morning, they're quiet all day, and then they get busy at the end of the day during the week. On the weekends, there's sporadic use throughout the day, but, you know.
The question is, what is really busy? Is 6 cars really busy?
Ma'am?
Well, when you're thinking about traffic concerns, particularly relative to the Park Street exit and enter sites, you're also thinking about those busy times. We have plethora of school buses and kids walking back and forth to school. 6 cars can make a huge difference depending on what the concentration of people and the traversing that transpires already exists. Park Street is a nightmare to pull in and out of. There's crossing guards, there's school buses, there's children. Again, we have a school bus on that circle, Treehouse Circle. It's 6 cars, makes a huge difference when everybody in 80 homes is trying to go to work in the morning or come home in the evening.
Thank you. So we were going to go down Highland Ave. So if it didn't come up clear, this is the site of an old Boy Scout camp. And there are some features that we identified as potentially desirable, which is that it has water. But I think as Jeff introduced, the access off of Highland, if you travel down there, it's just not abundantly clear how to get down into the property. And so that's obviously something to consider. But I don't know if other people have any questions or concerns to ask about the Highland Ave site. Sir?
Well, Highland Ave, I'm on the board of the Common Conservation Trust. One thing we've worked hard to do is develop properties along the Manhattan River, speaking of the wildlife corridors. And I'm not exactly sure how close this is to the river, but the closer it is, I think that's a concern. Dogs' presence or even past presence in terms of scent and things like that are a real deterrent to wildlife. So I just wouldn't want it to be, if it's very near to river properties, that would be a concern.
Appreciate that. I think it's set back. I think the presumption is that this is the Manhattan River over here. So we're definitely greater. So the standard distance is 200 feet from a river resource area, and I think it exceeds that. But I think your point is well taken.
Something like that, just you know, if you're the bear coming down there, you smell it way more than 200 feet away. All the dogs have nothing over here.
So it's wildlife as well. Okay. Sure.
Kelly Ritchie, 84 Highland Avenue. So basically everything you're looking at under the dog park is my property.
Under, I mean,
This here. Okay. Yep. Yep.
So concerns, Highland Avenue is a dead-end street. My property is the end of the street. There is no turnaround at the end of Highland Avenue. Where the arrow is, it would be your entrance into the dog park is basically my neighbor's driveway. There is a big ravine there. There's not even, I don't think you would get two-way driving down that area. You could if everybody was very conscientious and nice to each other, but we know that doesn't happen. The 20 parking spaces, are those also enclosed or will they be in the open? If people are taking their dogs out of the cars, if they are not on a leash, and as we all know, everybody thinks their dogs are so obedient, so they don't need a leash to get into the dog park, and their dog runs off. And I have a working farm. There are chickens, there are horses, there are donkeys, there are goats, there are other animals there. A dog would love to chase any one of those. So my concern is the dog that is running after my livestock on the property, which is directly across. So not only that, there's no sidewalk there, there's someone who walks down Highland Avenue. And Highland Avenue is not a very wide street. So it's also where there's a lot of young families with kids on the street. So I don't think that that is the best choice.
Thank you. Sir in the back.
Yeah, so question is being identified as the, I'm already blanking the name, Hammond Ave, is that correct? Is there a possibility of connection to out towards like O'Neill?
The question was whether there's any option or ability to potentially connect from the back of this property. So it is, this is one of the large manufacturing buildings that's on O'Neill Street.
Right.
And I think the quick test of this is that if you could see this part of the map, it's surrounded by, this is a water resource area, whether it's a river or wetland. So
Right.
I think unfortunately, this property is kind of isolated from access from O'Neill Street.
We did look at trying to get in there from O'Neill, and it just getting across too many resource areas to get to it.
Great, and so I think we're going to move to the final site, which is Nonotuck. Does everyone have a sense of where this is? So you're traversing into the park, and there's a pavilion. I don't know if it's actually called Pavilion 1, but it's pretty much the first pavilion is here, and then the road turns left and goes into where the second playground area was more recently installed. So I see a hand there.
I think Nonotuck's Park is a really bad idea because it's closed already. It's already closed. November 1st it closes. It doesn't open until April. You also have to pay to get in there. You have to pay to get into Nonotuck Park. So the time that it's closed and when it's open, you're going to have to pay to go to the dog park. So that's two things to think about. It's closed.
That's true. That's currently true about Nonotuck Park. It's unfortunate. The park is a gem in Western Mass, but it lacks 21st century vision. And I don't, as a taxpayer, like hearing that we can't have a dog park there because it's closed during the winter. I actually find it offensive that the park closes during the winter. It's time for the Park and Rec to move forward. Unfortunately, on the other hand, Park and Rec is kind of being dumped on. You know, it took over the cemetery, took over the town rotary. It probably will take over the rail trail in 5 to 6 years because the friends of the rail trail might not be around. So the park is under pressure, but that's where it belongs.
I saw your hand first.
I don't see why the park can't be open in the wintertime. Look, park's open, community field where that dog park in Holyoke is, that's open. Why can't they plow down?
They do plow
the dog
most of
park?
it. They just don't plow the loop, they do plow.
Yeah. You know what? I have to pay to get in to see my grandkids play t-ball. So I'm not going to use the dog park. I don't know if you're looking for funds for maintenance of a dog park or whatever. Why can't people who want to use the dog park buy a pass to get into the park, to use the dog park, and then that money goes to plow the road so the people can get to the dog park? I think Nonotuck Park is where it should go. It's more central to everywhere in the city almost.
I think there are a couple layers of issues with Nonotuck, so I don't know that we'll peel them all back now, but Mr. Ramsey's in the back, and you are on the Park and Rec Commission. So I don't know if you want to, I don't want to put you on the spot, and I want to turn to other people still too, but the Park Commission has had some discussion of this, if I'm not mistaken, and
I'm the liaison or whatever for the, I am one of the Park and Rec Commissioners. The park is staffed by 2 people in the winter. There's really, the gate money goes to general fund. It doesn't go to the park, it goes to the general fund. Just, I don't know, people knew that, but it's not, it doesn't go in a little can in the shed or anything like that. We beg for equipment, just like all the other departments. The department gets cut. I'm committed, it's volunteer, I receive no money for going to these, everything I do with the park, so it's just the name on a paper.
Right. So I think, were there other people who want to speak about Nonotuck Park?
Well, I was going to say,
Sure.
if you were to keep it open through the winter,
I know that would cost a lot more money to the taxpayers.
There's 2 people.
So, right, you would need more money to have it fully,
And-
or more staff to have
The
it.
parks were in charge of is the gazebo, the Rotary, the Catherine Root Park, which is a very small park, but nevertheless, it's a park. The cemetery, the cemeteries in town, those are lumped into the park and rec. Millside Park, the band shell, whatever the,
I don't want to stop this discussion. I will say, I think that if we can get into the dot exercise in a few minutes, just want to try to set an expectation about Nonotuck, is that if there is a lot of leaning towards Nonotuck, I think it's not something that will be an automatic choice. I think it will require quite a bit of additional discussion to understand what that actually means. So I don't know if it gets a lot of votes. I just want to be sort of setting the expectation that it's not an automatic decision. I think there are some implications that the nature of this meeting will not sort out all the implications, so I think it would cause some additional steps to be taken. I saw Councilor Kwasinski. Did you have your hand up for that?
I was just going to say that, thank you so much. What I've heard so far is that it probably will be that anywhere the dog park would be located, it's difficult to run the park all year long anyway. So that maybe December, January, February, maybe even March, we really wouldn't have a dog park regardless of where we put it. Just a point of clarification.
So I saw some more hands go up. I saw your hand. Oh, sorry. It was you and then yourself. Sorry. Second. And then third.
I'm Judy Green Corbet, and I live in Treehouse Circle. I feel really strongly, though, about the purpose of our public recreation spaces, dedicated spaces, so I feel very strongly that we should look to the gem that our city has, a 260-acre park. And I recognize what's been said, that if there seems to be a lot of interest in that, then it's not something we can resolve right here, and we can't resolve in the short term. So I guess if we end up in that direction, or if we hear a lot of support for something to be considered in Nonotuck, I don't think we need to necessarily jump on choosing between the sites that we have here if we determine that none of the sites are the best, but maybe, in my opinion, there's some more sites that could be considered, or more consideration given to having something in Nonotuck. I guess I'd just like us to consider that we might not have to come up with the right choice and submit a proposal right now. If there seems a lot of community interest in looking at Nonotuck, then let's explore some of those challenges for that.
Yeah, and I think we need to kind of go through this, the last step of this, because I don't know that necessarily everyone would put their dot on Nonotuck. So I think we want to go through this exercise and see, as the expectation kind of became clear that we might be trying for one or two. I think to get to one may not happen, but I think if we can get some direction for one or two sites, I think that should be the primary goal. Jeff and I were just talking about the idea of trying to give everybody one dot and really make it something that you can give a little thought to. The only other version of this would be 2 dots. I think giving people 3 is too much, because I think I don't know if you have any strong opinion on 1 or 2.
No, I think yeah. I mean, I think there's, hopefully there's a a favorite people have or preference, and we don't need to get into second and third choices. But
right.
yeah,
I mean, I think 1 dot would be the most accurate sort of representation, because I think 2 dots may double the weight of this group, and maybe that's okay. I'm just talking through this. So 2?
So
we'll try 2. Okay, yes, ma'am. Here we go. Sorry.
I think what happened, say hypothetically, Nonotuck is everyone's favorite because it's logical. You don't need a lot of infrastructure costs. There's pavement already existing there. You can do fencing, and there's a driveway, and everybody knows where Nonotuck is. So all of those criteria are met. But hypothetically speaking, if you choose Nonotuck, you can take 2 acres from Nonotuck's 260 acres and put it with another entity. The town has control to remark its land, and they can call it the Friends of whatever park owned by the town. What I'm saying is there's a lot of flexibility, And it doesn't have to come under parks and rec, but be a dog park within that 200.
Right. I mean, I think the only, it may not be the only. I think one of the caveats is that, so I think we're going to give 2 dots. Jeff, does that make sense?
That works for me. I hope I have enough dots.
I just think that when we look at Nonotuck, there are financial implications to the Parks Department. I think whether or not there's a Friends of group, there will be the need to change something about the operations of Nonotuck, and I think that I think that is going to be a process unto itself to talk through that. Well, I think for clarity purposes, the dog park does not require staff typically, and it's a organization that is volunteer-based that raises funding to have the funding for it. So, well, I think we don't want to oversimplify anything. So I'm not trying to discredit what you're saying. I think it's just something that will need more thought. In the back, yes, you've been patient.
The grant you were talking about at the beginning, are we under some time crunch where that grant money only exists for X amount of time, and that's why there's a push? Like, is this an indefinite grant? When do we have to apply for it by?
I can answer part of that. I mean, we don't know if it's an indefinite grant. Most funding sources at some point will end, but I don't know if there's an end date currently for Stanton. The way the applications work is they are accepted on a rolling basis. And I think it's just important that what we need to do is go through, so in order to be eligible for Stanton, we need a site, and then we need design through Stanton, and then we need to reapply again for the actual construction grant. I want to make sure that I, in a transparent way, say that in some of these sites, the construction grant would not be enough to fund it completely. So I think the expectation, just so everyone is on the same page, is that the expectation would be potential Community Preservation Act funding to match this. And I think that that's pretty common across the state for those towns that have CPA. So CPA, again, is only used for really 3 purposes: open space and recreation, affordable housing, and historic preservation. So it's definitely something that is eligible for CPA, and that would be not, my careful consideration of this is that it's not intended to be a tax or come from the general fund revenue or be an impact. It would be utilizing a CPA fund.
That doesn't come from that. I hope you go to the CPA for any funding, but it's very transparent and got lots of opportunity to weigh in.
Yes, yep. So CPA would be an entirely separate process. Okay, great. And then I see someone in the back. Thank you. Yep, that's great.
I know that this is still super early in the stages, but I just wanted to point out, because we hike the nature trail in Nonotuck a lot, and we have almost never seen anyone there, so I don't know how popular they are. But I just want to, make sure that there's a voice for the existing trails that are there, so they don't necessarily get fenced off. Right. Because I think those are pretty.
I think in that vicinity, the Topman Trail is not on this side, but I think your point is well taken. In the back, and then I think we're going to try to move into working out how to approach the boards.
So I just want to say that the dog park may not need to be heated in the winter, and I disagree with that so much because that's when your dogs need exercise. Weather like this, they're out hiking and walking. I found Nonotuck with my other dog because it was the only safe, plowed place to walk my dog. And we went there every day. And the entire park is not plowed, as you know, but the main road was plowed, and a lot of people walk their dogs there. And again, it's very important to have it in the winter. And I did offer years ago to pay for a permit so that the dogs could legally be there off leash. And of course, it wasn't allowed. So, I mean, dog owners that want to use it probably would be willing to pay for something for part of that upkeep.
I'll take one more, and then we'll break out into.
but I like it because the water and the bathrooms, the accessibility, limitations on wildlife impact. But one of the great things about it is that it's really close to a lot of residential homes, making it walkable, but not so close that people will be bothered by noise or cars or anything else. I think that that site will have more people than all the other sites that are able to walk to it. And I think that's huge. You know, a lot of people take their dogs out for a walk, so that I can envision them walking there and then going into the park. More than any of the other sites, we're making people drive to many of these.
Thank you. So I'm going to get some dots from Jeff, and if we can try to do this, and I think the idea, and I'm going to look at Councilor Kuzinski and Councilor Zaret. I mean, I think we want to try to close the loop on this somehow, and it won't happen tonight. So would it be unreasonable to set a date, or should we figure out how to have some of the findings come to the property subcommittee? We didn't really talk about this, so I'm just trying to figure out if there's a mechanism that we can put in place.
To have the findings come to this?
Yes, and to have people who are interested kind of identify. I mean, we'll see a little bit of the breakdown.
I certainly see another, a meeting where we could further discuss this. Yes, absolutely. And I think my fellow committee members would agree, if that's your question.
Yeah. I just was wondering, would it be at all possible to carve off a date? No. Okay.
And do we have to have it someplace where we have to pay to have it? I know you have to pay for this room.
Right. Well, I think well, I think we would have the final. I mean, the final discussion will be refined. But let's get to the dot exercises, and then we'll think before everyone leaves. So.
Well, it's also, we can't, as a committee, it's just for all transparency, with 3 members of the subcommittee here, we can't really get into any deliberations. It's not an official meeting. So just to clarify that, so we can't. What else we can't?
I have a suggestion.
I understand, but I just want to make it clear.
Can we have dots of the parts, like 2 dots of the parts we don't want? And then 2 dots that we do want?
The dots are going to the park.
Green is first choice.